Zion Foster was last seen on January 4th of 2022 at her home in Eastpointe, Michigan. She reportedly left her home with her cousin Jaylin Brazier and has not been seen since. Some of the theories reported by Foster's family was that sex trafficking could be a reason for the 17-year-old's disappearance. It is reported that Jaylin and Foster were smoking marijuana together that night of January 4th of 2022. Jaylin, who is 24 years old, claims that his cousin stopped breathing for an unknown reason while they were smoking. He said that he panicked and decided to put her body into a dumpster because she wasn't breathing. Officials say that Brazier put the 17-year-old in the trunk of his car and drove her body to a landfill. When Detroit resident Jaylin Brazier turned himself in on January 19th, he did so alongside his lawyer. He admitted he had been lying to police, and 3 days later, he was officially arrested on a warrant connected to his cousin's disappearance. Officials charged him with lying to a police officer in a violent crime investigation and lying to a peace officer. He was arraigned on January 24th of 2022. On March 30th of 2022, Brazier was sentenced to 23 months to 4 years in prison for lying during the investigation of Foster's appearance. But in January of 2023, he was released. 2 months later, a search for Foster's body began on May 31st at Pine Tree Acres landfill in Lenox Township. The massive search was planned for a 100 by 100 foot area. Local crews used heavy machinery to remove about 20 feet of material to search the landfill for Foster's body. Originally, officials said that the search could last as long as 7 to 8 weeks. At the beginning of August, crews dug between 25 to 28 feet. Authorities believe that Foster's body could be buried at least 75 to 100 feet beneath the surface of the landfill. Police say that they searched through 3,500 truckloads of trash. The landfill search concluded on October 12th of 2022. On Tuesday, June 13th, 2023, Wayne County Prosecutor Kym Worthy charged Jaylin Brazier with 1 count of first-degree murder of his cousin, Zion Foster. The following video content will be portions of the trial for Jaylin Brazier in the murder of his cousin, Zion Foster.
Pretty consistent as far as the nature of the incident of what happened, as far as the shallow breathing, the faint heartbeat. So I don't believe that it has changed as much at all. And is that there has not been any evidence that proves there is a false exculpatory statement made by Mr. Brazier. He's been pretty consistent as far as the nature of the incident of what happened, as far as the shallow breathing, the faint heartbeat. So I don't believe that it has changed as much at all in all his different statements, all three of them. So I would do it.
And Your Honor, the people's position is that Mr. Brazier has not at all been consistent with the multiple statements that he's given. And just to cite 2 easy examples of false exculpatory statements. First, on January 6th of 2022, when he was questioned by 2 Detroit police officers on body-worn camera, he lied and said that he had not seen Zion Foster since May of the year before, and denied knowing anything about the circumstances of her disappearance. Second, on January 19th, when he finally came in and changed his story, that day he claimed that they just used marijuana together and nothing else. The very next day he gave another statement where he indicated that they consumed LSD and he believed that must have been what killed her. And then on June 10th of 2022, when he was interviewed again, he said that the LSD claim was quote-unquote bullshit, that he just offered to the police. So there's more than enough to suggest that he has given false exculpatory explanations in this case.
Well, I read the case law, and certainly the proposed jury instruction, and the jury instruction provides that this jury would have to determine whether the statement was made by the defendant, whether the evidence has shown that the statements to be false, and if they were determined that any of these statements were false, then that could be used to determine the guilt or innocence of the defendant. Certainly, I think There's been testimony that he's provided different explanations about what happened January 4th and 5th and the potential causes of the death of Ms. Foster. It was indicated that initially she wasn't there with him, and then obviously then later on that he was with her. So I think the instruction is appropriate that would offer it. All right. Then you also have an instruction.
Yeah, two proposed limiting instructions. One, in regards to the testimony that was elicited by Sergeant Sarah Markle when she was reading a text message that allegedly came from my client speaking of some type of scam that he was interested in. If we can get some limiting instruction, basically stating that they're not to use that evidence in consideration of when they're deliberating the charges. And also in regards to the fact that he was in custody in Michigan Department of Corrections, or what he was charged with to lead to his incarceration, if we can have a limited instruction basically stating that the jury is not to use that information when deliberating the charges in this particular case.
I think there's agreement on those two issues, correct?
Correct, Your Honor.
Okay. And you'll provide some language?
Yes.
All right. And then the final issue, I think, was that we discussed late yesterday afternoon with regard to manslaughter. Typically, in second-degree murder cases, there's a request for a manslaughter instruction. I guess from my perspective, I don't think it's appropriate. I don't think there's been any evidence that there's been any sort of reckless conduct. I think the question is whether or not Mr. Brazier committed this crime or he didn't. He's maintained his innocence from the outset.
I would agree.
Mr. Owsley?
Certainly, I mean, if the defense isn't requesting it, I wouldn't see any reason to offer that here.
I don't see it from the evidence presented so far.
I mean, I think typically when we're looking at voluntary manslaughter as a lesser included, we're dealing with the issue of whether there was some kind of adequate provocation that caused somebody to commit a killing, you know, under that sort of extreme state of emotional excitement. I don't think there's any evidence of that here. If we're looking at involuntary manslaughter and some sort of negligent act, that's kind of a different analysis, but I still don't see that necessarily as applicable here.
The defense has been that she voluntarily consumed some illicit drugs, and that apparently resulted in her death. And that she brought the narcotics to the home of Mr. Brazier, so I don't know how that would indicate him even in an involuntary way. Okay. Anything else before we call the jury?
I don't believe so, Your Honor.
Nothing further.
Call the jury.
All rise for the jury.
All right, we did just want to do a quick recap of what you just heard here. That was the judge, the defense, and prosecution pretty much trying to discuss some things about the jury instructions. There are certain things that Brazier's attorney is wanting the jury not to consider once it goes to them. We will hear more about those when the jury gets instructions, which will probably happen here soon. Back to court now.
Yes, Your Honor. The people recall Detective Eric Franti.
Good morning. Can you have a seat? Good morning, Mr. Friety.
Good morning,
I
sir.
understand you administered the oath yesterday, and you're still under oath, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Franti, I just have a couple of questions to wrap up with. And up on the screen, I have what's been admitted as Exhibit 73A, which we had some discussion about yesterday. I want to ask you about row 17 in particular. And again, if you could just tell the jury what the URL is indicated in row 17.
Yes, it's www.xvideos.com / K equals black plus cousin.
And did you have an opportunity last night after you testified to sort of refamiliarize yourself with that xvideos.com website?
Objection, I believe that's a mischaracterization. He indicated that he never went to the website ever, so he wouldn't been in the position.
That is absolutely not the question that I just asked. I asked him whether he had an opportunity to familiarize himself with that website last night after he
I
testified.
thought you said refamiliarize.
That's what I thought you said. All right, go ahead.
Did you have an opportunity to go to that website last night after you testified?
Yes.
And is there any way on that website to plug in specific search terms?
Yes, there is.
And how would you plug search terms into that website?
If you were on your phone, you would just tap on the search box, and
Okay.
then your keyboard would pop up.
And is there any way on that website to filter a search by date?
Yes, there is.
And how would you filter a search by date?
There's several categories below the search box, but you can sort by date, relevance, things like that.
Okay. And can you filter by a certain date range?
Yes.
And
The largest is 6 months. The smallest is 1 week.
can you filter by 3 months?
Yes.
Okay. And did you, when you went to the website, did you plug in specific? Did you try to plug in specific search terms into the search box?
Yes.
And which search terms did you plug in?
I searched the term black cousin.
And did you filter that search by date?
Yes.
And what was the date range that you used to filter that search?
3 months.
And when you did that, did you see a particular URL get generated?
Yes.
And was there any significance to that URL that you saw?
Yes, it was that URL right there.
The one that's reflected in row 17?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Nothing further.
Cross-examine.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Detective.
Good morning, sir.
Now, when did you first begin your analysis on this particular exhibit, 73A? Approximately.
Approximately last night?
Last night was the first time you ever did an analysis on exhibit 73A?
I looked it over
You looked it over.
prior to that.
Okay. And you knew you were coming to court to testify in this particular trial, correct?
Correct.
And you waited until after trial yesterday in order for you to go to this website to do an analysis on it, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Did you take any notes while you were doing your analysis?
In terms of,
In terms of anything? Did you take any notes while you were doing your analysis?
yes.
Did you?
Yes.
Okay. And did you take a copy or screenshot of the actual URL when you went to this particular site?
No, I did not.
You did not? Okay. Did you write it down?
No, I did not.
You did not? Okay. So you just, based upon your memory, it's the exact URL, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, why would you do the analysis before yesterday or last night on this particular information?
On this particular information?
Yes.
I was focused on other
Other cases?
tasks, yeah.
Okay. And you knew that you were going to be requested to be an expert in this particular, or at least somebody testified in this particular case on this particular subject matter, correct?
Correct.
Okay. But yet you didn't do your homework to, I guess, educate yourself on this particular information, correct?
Correct.
And you stated that you guessed or assumed yesterday that K equals search. What type of research did you do to come to that conclusion?
I did a Google search on what that means.
You did a Google search. So what term did you put into the search engine on Google to come back with an answer?
What does $K equals mean in a URL?
Okay. And you didn't go to any various sites to verify the validity of that particular answer, did you?
I did go to multiple sites. Yeah.
You went to multiple sites?
Yes.
Name a couple of sites that you went to.
The main one was Microsoft in their forums.
Okay. So you went to Microsoft in their forums. So you were reading the forums and just taking what their answers were at face value?
Yes.
Okay. But my question was, what, I guess, search engine, or not search engine, but website did you go to plug in a term into their search engine to verify that the URL would actually have K equals? That's my question.
I went to x3dos.com and typed in black cousin, and that's what it means.
You did that last night, right?
Right.
You testified yesterday, before last night, that you assumed or you felt you knew that K equals means a search, correct?
Correct.
My question is, what website other than last night did you go to use their search engine on that particular website to come to a conclusion that K equals search?
Microsoft's website and then a website called Stack Overflow Exchange.
Stack Overflow Exchange?
Yes.
What type of website is that?
That's a website for programmers of websites.
And did you ask a question or you just was reading through the forum?
I was reading through the forum. The question was already asked.
Okay. So you didn't go to independent websites to verify if those answers were correct? True?
Correct.
Now, in your task, were you also presented Exhibit 73B, which is a full web, what, actually? And were you provided this information?
Yes.
Okay. And it was your understanding that this was a complete web history of this particular device that you were asked to do some analysis on, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you would agree that this particular website has over 18,000 different, I guess, entries, so to speak, correct?
This particular evidence, yes.
Okay. And you would agree through this interface, you're able to search particular terms, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And if you were to search, say for instance, porn on this particular interface, you would get approximately 1,154 entries, correct?
I'm not sure. I did not perform that analysis.
You didn't perform that analysis?
No.
Okay. Or you can say search. Yes.
And just for the record, I'm searching Exhibit 73B, doing a keyword search for the term form. And then I'm clicking show results. And then, again, just for the record, it says the number of results is 1,154.
So, Detective, you would agree that this particular document would indicate there's 1,154 different entries of porn, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And the Exhibit 73A, which you were testifying about, only had 27 different entries for this that were related to a cousin, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So that would be 27 out of 1,154, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, when you were doing your analysis, why wouldn't you search for the keyword of porn? What were you searching for? What were you doing?
I wasn't searching this document specifically.
But you had the document, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so what were you searching for then?
I was analyzing 73A.
You were analyzing 73A? Okay, but in order to analyze 73A, don't you need 73B, more of a bird's eye view of the totality of the web search in order for you to make an analysis? Don't you think that?
I wasn't asked about anything about 73B.
Okay, but you did receive it though, right?
That's correct.
Okay, and you thought they just gave it to you just because they didn't have nothing better to do?
No. I was only asked about the information that was in 73A.
They was asking you what your opinion is, what you felt about it?
They were asking me about the specific web URLs.
Okay. But they were asking you about the specific web URLs, but you didn't even go to that specific website to check, right?
Correct.
So you didn't even do the task that they asked you to do, correct?
I'd say I did.
You'd say you did?
Yeah.
Okay. But your actions would maybe dictate something else. That'd be a fair statement, right?
No, sir.
Thank you. No further questions.
Did you read it?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Any questions from the jury? Seeing none, read your sentence.
Thank you, sir.
We're going to watch now the closing arguments in the case, and I will tell you that I know the defense has at least an hour and a half, at least, between their closing and their rebuttal. And the defense has said that he's only going to need about 30 minutes, roughly. So it's going to be a couple more hours long. So go grab a coffee, go grab something to eat, whatever you need, and settle in with me here as we do this verdict watch. And I'll keep an eye out. If anything goes live with the verdict, we'll change over to that. Okay. And also, if the verdict does come out while I'm in the middle of recording this, I'm just going to go live. I'll pause this recording and then I'll go live in a separate one. Okay. So again, check the playlist out that's in the description of this video so that you don't miss any of the pieces of this trial with me. Let's get to it.
Mr. Brazier, Mr. Brown, and Mr. Elsey, are ready to receive closing arguments?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes.
Seated, all members of the jury are present. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now going to proceed with closing arguments. Now, the way this works, the people will speak first, then the defense will speak, and then the people will speak last. Now, people always have the last word, not because the system favors the people, but because they have the burden of proof, and because it's beyond a reasonable doubt, whether it's a very serious case or a smaller case, people always speak last. Okay. Mr. Elsey.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a long couple of weeks, and obviously a lot's been thrown at you. You've heard a lot of testimony. You've seen a lot of evidence, and I have a lot to say about that evidence. But I want to start by thanking you. This is obviously face a difficult way for you to fulfill your obligations as jurors. And as you can see, this was a case that was taken very seriously, and for good reason, because a young girl disappeared. And as this investigation progressed, every time another layer of evidence was peeled away, every time another one of the defendant's lies was exposed, things began to look uglier and uglier. And the need to bring closure to this case, the need to bring closure to Zion Foster's family became very pressing. So I do want to thank you. I want to thank you for the attention that you paid to the details in this case, because this is a case where the devil is in the details. I want to thank you for being here and taking the time out of your lives to fulfill your obligations as jurors in this case. So on behalf of Kym Worthy, the prosecuting attorney for Wayne County, on behalf of the family of Zion Foster, I thank you for the work that you've done in this case. This, the heart of this trial is really a simple question. Why did this young woman end up in one of these dumpsters, and then in all likelihood in this landfill? That is the heart of this case. And through the evidence that you've seen, there is an equally simple explanation, and that's that he murdered her. Now, I told you in my opening statement last week that there's only two people who can tell you exactly what happened inside that house that night, and I don't pretend to be one of them. One of them is Zion, and she's obviously gone, and she can't tell us. The other is the defendant, who, if you've seen anything in this trial, you've seen that he has an astonishing capacity for deception. But what I can tell you is that the circumstances in this case, and I'm going to walk through all of the circumstances in this case. The circumstances in this case lead to one inescapable and obvious conclusion. And that's that inside that house that night, there was some sort of sexual encounter that was resisted, and Zion paid for her life because of that. And that he put her in that dumpster because he murdered her, not because she died from a marijuana overdose or an LSD overdose or COVID-19 or death by Prozac or a seizure or any other of the shifting nonsense that you've heard from the defense from the start in this case. She died because he murdered her. Start with the relationship that they had, the relationship that he denied from the start but was unearthed in her text messages. He was grooming her. He was grooming her for a sexual relationship. And we see that because he acknowledges in one of his interrogations that the basis of their relationship was a shared bond over the fact that she had survived a sexual assault that had gone unreported.
He said that for a while before here, she was being raped, and her mom and everybody knew about this. And I also have went through some similar unfortunate happenings. And that was basically our bonding.
That was the bonding. That he knew that she had been sexually abused and that no one had been held accountable for that, which makes her what? It makes her a target. And he never acknowledges explicitly that he had a sexual interest in her, but oh, by the way, her friend Alima, the same age of her, he would have gotten with her if the opportunity presented itself, despite that 5-6 year age gap.
So there's no talk of getting with her?
I'm not gonna lie to y'all. No, you know what? It was presented. Maybe, I don't know. Sure, but.
And then we have these text messages found on Zion's old phone with the contact that she had for the defendant under the name Favu, her favorite cousin, under his phone number. And we see thousands of text messages. And we see in these messages that he is moving closer and closer into her life and into her business. He offers to get her weed in January of 2021. Let me know if you don't have shit to do later. I'll bring some more weed. May of 2021, when she's, by all appearances, at his house regularly at that time from the context of the messages. Do you want me to run a shower? He asks her. He tries to get into her iCloud account, gets her password to her iCloud account. That same month, he asked, do you want to just come over? Because I'm going to be taking Katrina to work soon. May of 2021. And he tells her she can stay there. She can stay at his house. And he reiterates it, not only on May 23rd, you can always pimp out the basement at my place if need be, until you're able to get your own spot, he tells her. And then tells her again a few days later, just keep my place as your plan B. He advises her when she's run away how to evade the police, how to delete evidence from her phone that same month. He's in her business. He, later on, just a month before her death, he's trying to get together with her. You trying to smoke later? He asks her in December of 2021. And then we see all these sexually explicit messages that he shares at a time when she's primarily 16 years old and he's either 22 or 23. February of 2021. With his 16-year-old cousin, who is a survivor of sexual assault, he sends her pornographic images. March of 2021. With his 16-year-old cousin, who is a survivor of sexual assault, he tells her, I'm about to be big single. I'm going to get to slanging my meat at my freak bitches again. He tells her that he's in need of some head. That same month, March of 2021, he tells his 16-year-old cousin, who is a survivor of sexual assault, that this little freak is about to gobble me. He tells her in May of 2021, to his 16-year-old cousin, who is a survivor of sexual assault, that he is a god. He is a god, and he brags that he can get with another girl when his child's mother, his live-in girlfriend, is in the same house. And my girl knows everything she needs to know, he tells his 16-year-old cousin, who is a survivor of sexual assault, and adds that the two women had apparently had sexual relations together. That same month, May of 2021, he tells his cousin, who is a 16-year-old girl, who is a survivor of sexual assault, I can really do what I want if I choose to, in the context of sexually explicit discussions. In June of 2021, he tells his 16-year-old cousin, who is a survivor of sexual assault, that he is getting his dick gobbled right now, like right now. He complains to his cousin, who is a survivor of sexual assault, that this girl's jaw is getting tired and she's about to be outside in the rain, that he knows of no females that give head properly. Where's the throat goats? He asked his 16-year-old cousin, who is a survivor of sexual assault. And then he admonishes that Katrina's starting to ask questions, but fear not, because he's about to use manipulation level 3. I wonder what that looks like. He tells his 16-year-old cousin, who is a survivor of sexual assault, in July of 2021, that he's on the phone with some girl's sister and she walks in and taught me that he's foul as fuck. He tells his 16-year-old cousin, who's a survivor of sexual assault, later on that month that he's trying to fuck for real. And then, of course, writes it off as a mistaken contact. Perhaps that was. But these messages are pervasive. They are absolutely pervasive. And then we have other messages where he's commenting on how beautiful she is. He tells her, you're beautiful and smart as fuck. You're a problem, and obviously that's just what it is. He tells her she's pretty and all, but these guys are on her nuts. He tells her she always looks gorgeous. One bad day is fine. And then we have these messages commenting about the possibility that they have a relationship, that everyone's kind of grumbling that there's something going on between them. I wonder why that is. And he reaches out to his 16-year-old cousin, who is a survivor of sexual assault, and talks about how he's about to kick his child's mother
out of the house. That this bitch swear everybody want to fuck me or I'm just giving dick out, he writes to his 16-year-old cousin who is a survivor of sexual assault. And then it queries with her, God, you know, a lot of people are saying we're in a relationship. What do you think about that? Why do you think he's asking her that? That's some high school level stuff. People are grumbling that we're in a relationship. What do you think about that? And his girlfriend has some oddball jealousy thing with you, he says. Like, why? And then we see on his phone that's recovered during the short period from when he got released on the Macomb County case until he was arrested on this case. And what do we find on his phone? We find videos depicting the rape of young women. We find comic books depicting the rape of young women. We find specific cousin-themed pornography on that phone with specific search terms for black cousin, specific search terms for real plus step cousin, and then all the videos that come along with that. Watch me fuck my step cousin on her parents' bed. Me and my step cousin-in-law get caught fucking. Deep anal, my step cousin doggy while my step aunt is not at home. This tells you what's in his mind about Zion Foster. This tells you what his intentions were when he brought her to his house late at night on January 4th of 2022, behind the back of his pregnant girlfriend, who was at work at the time. He brought Zion over to his house late that night, and she leaves that house in the trunk of his car on a night where he has an unexplained gash on his collarbone. What do you think happened inside that house that night? She died of COVID? She died of a seizure? And all the evidence tells us, and I'm going to walk through the timeline that he never wanted anybody to see, because his initial impulse was what? It was to deny that he was ever with her that night. But all the forensic evidence, all the videos tell us that they were together and he was the last person with her. 10 o'clock p.m., his phone is consistent with being where? It's at his house. It's in the area of his house on the west side of Detroit. 10:20 p.m., her phone is consistent with being where? It's at her house in Eastpointe on the east side. 10:42 p.m., his phone is consistent with being in the area of where it's right in the area of her home. And you can see the path that he follows. He goes to Hazel Park from his phone, pops up, drops off Katrina Smith at work that night, and then he goes straight where? He goes to Zion Foster's home. And he's there in that area by 10:42 p.m. when, lo and behold, a car is seen pulling up to her house at that exact time. A car that looks exactly like his car. 10:48 p.m., his phone is still consistent with being in the area of Zion Foster's home. 10:52 p.m., Vertez Gonzalez, who testified that he heard the defendant's voice on the phone when Zion was in the car, he testified, I don't want to be on the phone. I'm sorry, he texted Zion, I don't want to be on the phone when you're with your cousin at 10:52, right after she would have gotten into that car. 10:53 p.m., he has further text messages corroborating his testimony. He says, not trying to have shit weird. I want you have your times. You confirmed it was him. I heard bro's voice, so it's cool. He heard the defendant's voice. 11:15 p.m., the defendant's car is now back in his driveway, and you can see the passenger side door open of that car in that driveway at 11:15 p.m. And you can see there's two people going into the house, one taller, one shorter. That is the defendant, and that is Zion Foster, the last image of her alive. 11:16 p.m., sure enough, his phone is consistent with being right there in the area of his house. 11:24 p.m., her phone is consistent with being where? In the area of his house, because that's when Vertez Gonzalez took that screenshot of her location sharing. 11:34 p.m., Zion's phone is still consistent with being at the defendant's house. All this data shows that they're together. 12:03 a.m. This is where you can start to see the deception at play. Katrina Smith messages the defendant, "How are you feeling?" He responds, "Tired, probably going to smoke a little and go to sleep." It's a lie. Why is it a lie? Because he doesn't mention that he has his 17-year-old cousin, who she's jealous of, over the house in the middle of the night behind her back. It's deception. 12:03 a.m. Vertez Gonzalez messages Zion, "What time are you going home?" She replies, "We finna smoke again." Does it sound like somebody who's committing suicide that night? She's out hanging out with her cousin. She's going to smoke again. Does that sound like someone who's just going to spontaneously kill herself? Victim texts a screenshot from her phone at 12:09 a.m. She texts that to Vertez Gonzalez, and it shows her where? It shows her at the defendant's house. It's just a mirror image because that's how FaceTime calls are before they connected. You get an inverted image. She's in his living room. 12:23 a.m. Katrina Smith messages the defendant, "She doesn't feel good, but how's your high?" 12:36 a.m. He responds to her, "Relaxing as fuck, actually fell asleep." Another lie. Why is it a lie? Because he doesn't mention, again, that there's someone else there. There's something else that he is up to that night that he does not want Katrina Smith to know about. 12:59 a.m. Zion Foster's last outgoing text message. "On my way home," she writes to Vertez Gonzalez. "On my way home." Again, does that sound like someone who was about to spontaneously kill herself, is one of the arguments that the defense has raised in this case? You can see a pattern up until this point in these communications. There's nothing out of the ordinary about Zion's communication. She's out hanging out with her cousin. She's smoking weed. She's about to go home. The defendant's communications, you see a pattern of deception because he's hiding the fact that she is there from the person that is closest to him in his life. We move on to 1:08 a.m. on January 5th, and Zion's phone is still consistent with being in the area of the defendant's house. But then 1:15 a.m., the phone suddenly drops from the cellular network. Just vanishes. All the data is suddenly gone. And that only happens because of one of several things. The phone is off, the phone's on airplane mode, or the phone is damaged beyond repair. This isn't accidental that the phone just goes off the network at this point. 1:25 a.m., this is where it starts to get really interesting. Katrina Smith, who's pregnant at the time, writes, "I think I need to come home. I don't feel good." The defendant's response, a few minutes later, 1:28 a.m., "You can make it, baby." Why doesn't he want to go pick her up at that point? Because he's just killed his cousin. 1:48 a.m., you can see his car pulls out of the driveway, and then it creeps all the way to the back of the driveway, away from the view of the road for the most part. 1:45 a.m., his phone still puts him right there at the house. He's still there. 1:48 a.m., the car is parked in back by now. There's a person, by all accounts, the defendant, who emerges from the house. He gets in the car, and then the light goes on. He's putting her body in the trunk at that point. A minute later, the car pulls off. And where does the car go from there? Where does the defendant's phone go from there? It goes straight to a parking lot full of dumpsters in Highland Park. You can see the trajectory following along the lodge, and the phone stays there. It stays in that parking lot for several minutes by those dumpsters. And you can see on the video that at around that same time, when you correct for the time differential, that a car pulls right up to that dumpster. And the lights on that car cut out in the middle of the night. And he wants you to believe he's there for totally innocent reasons. You can see a few minutes later that there's activity by that dumpster. It's hard to see because he cut out his lights, but you can see there's legs moving around right by that dumpster. And that's the dumpster, by the way, that he says ultimately, weeks later, after her body is long gone, he finally says, yes, I put her there. (2:08 a.m.) His phone's still consistent with being there in the area of the dumpster. 2:12 a.m. He finally messages Katrina Smith. She had texted him again at 1:32 a.m. saying, my stomach hurts and I feel sick and I keep getting hot and cold, but he had to dispose of Zion Foster's body, so he wasn't in a position to respond to that message. He finally responds at 2:12 a.m. after disposing of Zion Foster's body, and he finally says, okay, baby, do you want me to come now? He then follows up, I'll hop in the shower to kick this high off. Why is he hopping in the shower in the middle of the night for innocent reasons after disposing of a body? 2:15 a.m. You can see his car pull back into his driveway. And sure enough, at around that same time, his phone is consistent with having come directly from that parking lot full of dumpsters right back to his house. 2:21 a.m. Just after disposing of Zion Foster's body at 2:21 a.m. Just after getting home, you can see he's probably gotten in the shower, maybe taken his shirt off and seen the extent of the damage that she did to him when she resisted. And what does he say about that? He says that Nyla, the cat, scratched my neck. He says, I was trying to tickle her stomach and she beat my ass. But what is the person who was closest to him at that time say? Katrina Smith, who he later went to pick up from work and brought home that night. What did she say? Well, we'll get to that in a second, but what else do you think could have scratched him like that? Who else do you think could have scratched him? Could it have been Zion Foster who had her nails like that? Because as Katrina says, she saw a scratch that night. She testified that she saw a scratch when they got home together. She saw a scratch on his collarbone. And what did she say about that scratch? She said, and I quote, it was a big scratch. And I asked her whether that was something ordinary for the cat to do. And she said, and I quote, the cat, quote, never scratched that deep before to draw that much blood. That's an exact quote from Katrina Smith, the person who he did not want to testify at this case. What did she also say? She said that he seemed normal that night. He wasn't in a state of panic. He was behaving as though he had just committed a cold-blooded killing that he was covering up. That's how he was behaving. And it's interesting, if you look at the video from 11:15, he's wearing light pants in that video when he's out in front of his house with Zion. After he puts her in the dumpster, 2:42 a.m., he's probably going to pick Katrina up at this point. He's got dark pants on, so he's changed his clothes. He showered. Why would he do that in the middle of the night? Totally innocent reasons after putting somebody's body in a dumpster. He pops his trunk. He pops his trunk at 2:42 a.m. to have a peek inside. The same trunk that a cadaver dog later indicated in for the presence of the odor of human remains. 7:08 a.m., the garbage truck comes and it empties that dumpster. And Zion is gone forever. And the search for her becomes a search for a needle in a haystack. And what does he do after that? The very next day, January 6th, the day after putting her body in that dumpster, he goes to check on it. that afternoon, his phone shows a trajectory of him going directly from his house back to that parking lot, back to that area of the dumpster, and then back home after staying there, or back toward his home after staying there for a few minutes. And yeah, we can't say that that's his car that pulls up at that time. Obviously, that car has rims. His car didn't have rims. But isn't it interesting that there's a lot of activity by that dumpster at that same time that his phone puts him there? And then isn't it interesting that right after he leaves that, he searches the internet for the phrase, "Are trash trucks also compactors?" and visits a webpage entitled, "What is the force of a garbage truck compactor?" Remember, Zion's body would have been gone by now. The garbage truck had emptied it. So if he did go back, he would have seen that she was gone. And he's trying to figure out whether whatever happens during the process of trash being compacted in a garbage truck is going to mask whatever he did to her. Are the injuries her body would have sustained inside that garbage truck going to cover up the injuries that he imposed on her? That's what he's probing. And then we have this very meticulous campaign of obstruction that he engaged in from the start, because his first act of obstruction in this case was to get rid of the single most important evidence in this case. And I hate to reduce a human being to the term evidence, but Zion's body was the most important evidence in this case. That is the most important piece of evidence that could have shown exactly what happened. And he made sure that she was gone forever, never to be found. You're going to get this instruction on the concept of false exculpatory statements. And it essentially says that if someone lies and claims they're innocent, and that's proven to be a lie, you can consider that as evidence of their guilt. And you should consider that here, because we see lie after lie after lie in this early stage. He tells Zion's mother, "Hey, I'm talking to my girl about Zion, and we were wondering, how often did Zion say she was with me? Because that's wild. That high key is annoying, because why pull me into whatever she got going on?" He has the nerve to tell her mother just a day after, just hours after putting her daughter into a dumpster. He tells her, "Try to stay positive. She's probably okay." He has the nerve to tell her mother after putting her in a dumpster. I'm getting fed up with the back and forth with people asking me, have I seen Zion, or if she was over? And this is part of a pattern that you've seen throughout this case, that Zion Foster wasn't the victim. You see, Jaylin Brazier was the victim in this case. That's what he wants you to believe. And that's what he wanted Sierra Milton to believe when he lied to her in these text messages. He continues, "Come over, check the cameras so that you can see with your own eyes that this girl was not over here." He does the same with Vertez Gonzalez. It's just lie after lie after lie. "I'll show you my cameras. I'm dead tired of motherfuckers bothering me. I ain't got time to be part of this girl's motherfucking lies. My whole camera feed, that girl was never here," he tells Vertez Gonzalez, as these people are clinging to hope that maybe she's still alive somewhere. It's awful. Shit ain't got shit to do with me. Then you see the lies to the defendant's family. You heard Katrina Smith say that she never got a straight answer from him. You heard David McGee, the defendant's brother, say what? He said that he got two different answers. One was that Zion was never there. One was that she was, but with no explanation whatsoever of what happened to her and why she's missing. You've got the lies to the police. Detective Reinhold testified from Eastpointe when he still had the case. His initial phone conversations with the defendant were what? The defendant denying that he was with her. because he never wanted anyone to see all this evidence that confirmed that they were together in these circumstances. You have these utter lies captured on body-worn camera when those two Detroit police officers knock on his door on January 6th, just 2 days after the night that this all happened. And he says, what?
That's how I'm supposed to find out. I see my
He says the last time he saw her was in May, which is a complete lie. And he says that with such ease and such confidence and such calmness. He also tries to shift. Isn't it interesting that Zion's boyfriend was the one that kind of brought this up? Maybe you guys should look at him.
He's the one that kind of told everybody just
He says that again.
that the boyfriend is the one that kind of told everybody.
Again, deflecting. You shouldn't be looking at me. Look at these other people. He blames Zion's mother for what's going on.
I thought you were scared. I was like, my issue is for the long time. Alibi. One, not that. Anything. She said, at least once or twice a month, Zion said she's with me. I was like, why do you think, hey, why the fuck are you hanging with her start with? Like, you don't see me around. Our family don't really talk. I'm like, you think it's your fucking queen. So you're gonna see what she left with, who she's leaving with. You didn't even see she had a fucking coat on. But now I'm getting I'm stressed.
He's stressed. I'm sure it must have been difficult for him. He doesn't know at this point that these messages are going to be found because he's wiped his phone. He's gotten rid of her phone. As far as he's concerned, those 4,000 messages showing their relationship, showing their pervasive contact with one another, it's gone. It's never going to be discovered. So what does he do? He lies. He lies and says there was no relationship. And then he blames Zion. He blames Zion for her own disappearance.
I was never in my house. So we really, and she's known to be a runaway, but she's ran like 4 times, and every time she got some dude's house. And her mom knows this. Her mom's just playing it a certain way, and it's making me so fucking uncomfortable.
And then we have all the obstruction in the phone, the factory reset the defense wants you to believe was just some kind of accident. A day after lying to those police and telling them that he wasn't with her, has no idea where she was, he does a complete wipe of his phone to make everything disappear. And then after that, what do we find? We find in his Google records that weren't wiped, searches for how do the police track your phone? How do the police track missing people's phones? Can the police track a missing person's phone? And then in his own phone, after he wiped it, we find messages where he's searching for Celebrate, the program, the software that the police use to forensically image and analyze cell phones. And he's searching, how does the FBI satellite find people? How to tell if there's a stakeout on your property? How to tell if you're being watched by the police? How does the authorities pull up last known call info? Can the police track our call list if we delete the call history from our phone? How do the police get someone's call history? Can the police listen to a previous phone call? And then we have the witness interference and tampering. Starting with Katrina Smith, again, the person that was closest to him, the last person that he saw before he brought Zion over to his house on January 4th, and the first person that he saw after he dumped Zion's body in a dumpster. And his communications from jail, which are recorded, confirm that he did not want her to show up to court. The person who confirmed that there was evidence of violence on him, violence that was not explainable in the way that he tried to explain it as coming from a cat. He did not want her to show up to court.
I don't think this is leadership, but if so, take the advice from the effective attorney.
I will do.
Like 100%. And then after that, just don't respond. Yeah.
Just don't respond.
Right. Don't say nothing else.
And then he tells her, if I do take this all the way, as into trial, as good as you can, don't be there.
And if I do decide to go the whole way with this situation, and just listen to what I'm saying, I would say in a specific way, of course, but as good as you can, don't be there. You feel me? I said, as good as you can, don't be there. You don't have to be.
Okay.
Yeah, because I just don't want to see you in that predicament again. It's just bothers me. It's just like that first personal situation.
Well, the only option is don't take it there. They're gonna subpoena everybody.
And then you have this call with his mother where he calls from another inmate's line and says not to mention his name, but tells her she can speak candidly.
Try to make my name on here, but you can speak. Tell me what you're talking about now.
And in that call, he describes a statement made by someone by the name of D. And recall that his brother, David, you can, I think, fairly assume was D. His testimony was that on the one hand, defendant told him he wasn't with Zion Foster. On the other hand, at a later point, he said he was with her, but got no explanation from him about why she's missing, which seems a little incredible. Don't you think David would inquire a little bit more? So you were saying she wasn't with you. Now you're saying she was with you. What happened? Don't you think he would want to know that? Don't you think he would get some information about that from the defendant, his own brother? And what does the defendant tell his mother to tell D?
I already went over that and everything. In my paperwork and everything, tell him to stick to what he said when y'all went up to DVD. It literally says that he said he knew nothing about anything, nothing at all. The prosecutor is going to try to make, well, I assume so, try to make him go back on anything. Going to ask if they are really or something like that. And just no, that's all you got to do. That's my lawyer said. Just no, just stick to that.
And then after all this, after all the obstruction, after all the research he did about getting caught, about phones being traceable and things like that, at a time when there's intense media scrutiny on this case, the game's over. He's got to come up with some explanation. So on January 19th of 2022, when Zion Foster's body is long gone, he comes to the police station and he's got a lawyer and he's got a story. He's got a story to try to explain the unexplainable, to try to explain an innocent reason for putting a young woman's body in a dumpster. And you've seen throughout this that that's all that was. It was a story. It was a story that he couldn't keep straight during the many times that he told it. It was a story that, if you look at the material details of it, was full of demonstrable lies, and it's a story that's completely unbelievable. But let's start with just the idea that he couldn't keep this story straight. As an example, in the first part of his statement on January 19th, he couldn't even say that Zion was dead when he put her in the trunk. He just says that her heartbeat was faint, and it seemed like she wasn't breathing, and he went right to what? He went right to putting her in the trunk.
Well, her body, when her heartbeat was getting very, very faint, and her breathing was like non-existent. And mind you, all the other bad seconds, yes. I smoked. All we had was weed, no marijuana. So I freaked out. I'm like, okay, well, this looks terrible. This looks very bad. I didn't know what to do. So I took her, I put her into my trunk.
It's not until his lawyer goes over the statement with him that suddenly it's, oh, she was definitely dead at that point. Then we have this first claim that he makes that there was just weed, there was nothing else, and they mixed that weed together.
Did she bring the marijuana, or did you So there was nothing else? No. Okay.
Then the next day, what does he say? Oh, I wasn't honest. There was LSD too, and that must have been what killed her.
On this, okay. the drug use. Just recently, just before the night, of course, I was trying like psychedelics, like acid or LSD, everything. And okay, I think that's what killed her.
Do you? Did you put some of it in the marijuana? It was in your marijuana.
They're lieutenants, and I had two. And
Were you using it that night?
yes,
The ease with which he can lie is remarkable. And what does he say in June? He says that that was just a lie, another lie. He says it was bullshit.
Like, it was that, like, well, I left that out, about the LSD, but yeah, we both took a hit of LSD, and it must have hit her different, or hit her wrong.
He says he was pressured to say
Did you
that.
say it bullshit to him, or did he, see, I'm saying, he's telling me that, I'm trying to say, is he telling me bullshit that he didn't say, or did you?
no, that's why I thought, okay, I felt pressure to just throw something out there before I did not mention that.
Just throwing something out there. Then in that same statement, June 10th, it's, we never mixed the weed together. Unlike what he said earlier.
Weed or something? Okay, because I heard that, again, I'm glad I heard this, because wasn't it, your understanding that mix the weed?
No, I have no idea.
Never mixed it together. First, he claims on January 19th, by all appearances, the way he describes it is that Zion was just on the couch.
Okay, you ready? And she playing that like that. I was like, all right, so I think she probably take that one over there. Then I'd say about 10 to 15 minutes after that, after this, she said, okay, yeah, that she's going to sleep on soon. Yeah. I'll go wake her up, hey, are you ready to go? You know? And she wasn't like responding to anything I was doing. Like at one point, I shook her like this, like, hey, are you okay? Are you?
Then in June, it's right onto the floor, he says.
Oh, yeah, right on the floor, right there.
These are kind of important details to not keep straight for a story that he wants you to believe. And then we have, right after he makes that first statement, what does he say? He says essentially that his lawyer told him what to say. He didn't really mean it.
To me, my mom was okay when you say basically what I said and everything, that it would go a certain way.
Exactly.
On January 25th, in another call, he makes it even more expressly clear that this was just something that was made up.
And that statement was literally out of like fear from my family and shit, and that Gary literally had told me what the fuck to say, and I say that. And how he was like saying that like, he can't help being swampy hard. It's basically everything that you heard him say, everything my mom heard him say.
And then what does he do on December 25th? He calls Katrina Smith, again from somebody else's account. And he asks her to look into the pros and cons of recanting a statement in a criminal case. Because he was praying and meditating and poof, this just popped into his head. What does that tell you about the credibility of his claim that this was just some kind of spontaneous natural death?
I mean, I got something for you. I'm trying to call you what it's totally different on today. Look up pros and cons, positives and negatives to recanting a statement. Because that's what I wanted. I'm going to talk to my lawyer about. That's literally all they're using against me right now. And probably trying to build a theory off of everything. But not to keep over the thing with the first lawyer. And build that. I want to see what they think about that. I want to educate myself on it a little more first.
And it's not just that his statement is inconsistent. It's that some of the core details in that statement that he gave are demonstrably false. And that should tell you something about the believability of his overall statement. Look at this. He lies about having his kids with him. At his lawyer's suggestion, his lawyer mentions, well, who else was with you when you picked her up? And he at first says nobody, but then says, oh, my kids were with me.
But also, who was with you when you picked her up in the car? Just me and I had my kids with me. Yeah, my boys, because before
I had my kids with me. Where are the kids? Where's the car seats? Where's the 1-year-old and 2-year-old in tow with them? There's nobody else in that image but the two of them. He lies about not going back to the dumpster.
No.
So you haven't been back over into that area since that day at all?
I haven't been over there at all, he says. But you know what doesn't lie? Forensic data does not lie. And that data places him right back there, right before he's searching the internet about what a garbage truck can do to a human being's body. He lies about not touching Zion's phone.
And you saw that she was texting or talking, that's like last time we saw her phone?
Yeah.
Okay, and you did not take it out, you didn't touch it after, you didn't do anything with it?
No.
Again, the phone goes off network, 1:15 a.m. We know it wasn't the battery that died because you can see from the screenshot that she sent her boyfriend at 12:09 a.m., just about an hour before that the battery is just fine. And he wants you to believe that the person that wiped his own phone, the person that disposed of a human body in a dumpster, didn't touch Zion's phone. It's ridiculous. He lies about not knowing that Katrina Smith was pregnant at the time.
Disappointed that she's pregnant. She's putting off and everything. She's like, I need to come home. Look at me up.
He says he didn't know she was pregnant at the time, but we have the text messages from her from January 4th, early in the morning, before all this happened, where she's talking about what? She's talking about being at the doctor because she's pregnant. So that's another lie. He lies about not deleting his cameras.
I didn't touch the cameras at all.
I didn't touch the cameras at all. So why is he telling the police when they're there, come on and look in these cameras. You can see everything and see that this girl wasn't here.
I've been doing this all day. I'm ready to get shit out. It's out the way. Has this phone been a ring? It only records in the ocean, so I say.
And what did Sierra Milton say? She said that when she looked in that system directly, she saw what? She saw gaps, missing footage, because he didn't want anybody to know that Zion was there that night. He lies about not deleting his phone.
Phone?
No.
You didn't delete contacts, you erase anything, like, if you did it, I get, everything has been leading up to you trying to conceal something.
Didn't delete anything from his phone, he says. But then 2 days after he put Zion's body in a dumpster, the data, again, the data that doesn't lie, tells us that his phone was wiped completely, factory reset. He lies in June 10th about he didn't want Zion staying over when she was run away. He tells Sergeant Sullivan. Listen to this.
So Zion, I was like, that's one of the main reasons. I was like, you can't stay here. Going legal problem second. I'm not worried about the problem at home. Happy wife.
What do the messages say? His messages with Zion at the time say, come right over. We understand completely. Keep my place as your plan B, he tells her. And then we just have the downright unbelievability of this idea that this young woman just died spontaneously for no reason in front of him. And there's a number of things I want to walk through on this issue that show that the defendant's claim is not reasonable. It's not just that it's inconsistent. It's not just that his claim is embedded with all these lies on other big details. It's that the overall claim itself makes absolutely no sense. Listen to this. Listen to one of his first explanations for what he did.
I think she was dead. Okay. That's what it looks like. I freaked out and basically you have to for her, so I jumped and I moved her because I was like, okay, this looks as though I just killed somebody or something, And
why would it look like he had just killed somebody if she died of natural causes? Why would it look like he had just killed somebody unless he actually killed her? Why was his immediate reaction as you heard him say, his immediate reaction, it wasn't to administer CPR, it wasn't to call 911. His immediate reaction was to put her body in the trunk of his car and make her disappear forever. Why was his alternative that he described to put her in his basement?
Well, I thought, well, I could just put her in my basement or something, you know, so.
Why did you drive over to Highland Park? Because I
Did you know
couldn't put
anybody?
her in my basement or something. He's asked again that same question in June, and his alternative at that point is putting her in a storage unit.
There's something different, you know, I mean, as a parent, you would have to get, you know,
I would ask the why, but, my process is just like, I didn't know what to do. What am I supposed to do? Get a storage unit or put a motherfucker in the basement? I didn't know what to do. Like I said, I've never been in a situation.
Why can't he apologize for what he did? He was asked by Sergeant Sullivan in June of 2022, what would you say? What would you say to Zion's mother? What was his answer?
if you could talk to her, I'm not saying reach out, don't cause concern still, but if you could talk to her,
I would simply ask,
what would you say?
what? I can't apologize enough for my reaction.
You can apologize
for
putting your daughter's body in a bench.
Go ahead, go.
You heard testimony from Dr. Lavity, the medical examiner, that people don't die from marijuana overdoses. People don't die from LSD overdoses. That was the first explanation that the defendant offered in his initial statement to the police on January 19th and 20th. First, it was, we were smoking weed. By implication, that's what killed her. Next, it was LSD, and that must have been what killed her. Those don't cause death. You heard Dr. Lavity say that nothing that the defendant described was consistent with another type of overdose death. The idea being, well, what if that weed was laced with something? What if there were pills used? What if there was fentanyl involved? The death would not proceed in any way, shape, or form like the circumstances that the defendant described. And you can see in her initial report that her letter that she drafted in June of 2023, the circumstances currently disclosed by the defendant, that is, about her death do not make medical sense. And there is absolutely nothing that changes that bottom line conclusion up until today. And if she did die in this way, why didn't he search the internet about why a young woman might die suddenly? Why is he only searching the internet about evading law enforcement? Why is he only searching the internet about getting caught? Why isn't he doing research about this sudden, inexplicable medical condition that happened right in front of him? There's no search activity about marijuana overdoses, LSD overdoses, narcotics overdoses, seizures, medical issues that could otherwise cause a young girl to die suddenly. There is this search or this visit for one web page for WebMD. And if you drill down in the data, the page visited is common and rare side effects for Unisum, a medicine that has nothing to do with this case. And you can see the search activity from that same time before that web page was visited was for, does Unisum raise blood pressure, and why does Unisum make my chest feel tight? This is from January 14th, which has nothing to do with this case. He's not on WebMD researching why Zion died. He's researching the side effects of a medicine. And then we have these other defense explanations. So marijuana overdose, that didn't work. LSD overdose, that didn't work. Other drug overdose, that didn't work. So let's talk about suicide then. Let's try this. Zion was suicidal and she must have killed herself. Again, there's nothing in the communications from Zion that night that suggests she was suicidal. Her communications were normal banter back and forth with her boyfriend. That's it. She's out smoking weed with her cousin. She's going to smoke again and then come home. That's not the behavior of someone who's about to be suicidal. And if she did kill herself, how did she do it? It wasn't a drug overdose, because this wasn't an overdose death. And why would you put somebody's body in a dumpster to cover up the fact that they committed suicide, and then lie about it, and then obstruct and obstruct and obstruct and obstruct? The defense suggested this was a COVID-19 death? Come on. That should tell you how desperate they are. Was there any evidence she was in some sort of advanced stage of pneumonia at the time? Was there any evidence that she was having some kind of respiratory crisis at the time? No, there's no evidence of that. Yes, she had COVID. Probably everybody in this country has had COVID recently. Death by Prozac, that's the other one. I like this one. She gets prescribed the lowest dosage of an entirely safe and commonly prescribed medication. That has absolutely nothing to do with this. That is nothing but a distraction. And then we have the seizure issue. I want to answer this question. Why are we even talking about seizures? And the answer is that in August of last year, when Vertez Gonzalez testified at the preliminary examination, he testified that he saw Zion Foster at one time go like this. That's it. He testified that he saw Zion Foster close her eyes and appear to pass out for 1 to 2 seconds. That's why we are talking about seizures in this case. And that is nothing but a complete and utter distraction. Why is this a distraction? Well, because there's no evidence that Zion was on seizure medication. Vertez may have thought she was, but he's not the one who filled her prescriptions for her. Her mom did. There's no evidence in that 638 pages of medical records that she was medicated for seizures. Zion's mother testified that even though one of her other children has seizures, so she's familiar with symptoms, never saw Zion have any seizure symptoms. You see in that 638 pages of medical records that Zion went to the doctor a total of 19 times from 2016 until the month before her death, including a period in which she was hospitalized for COVID. Don't you think that if she had seizures, if she had some sort of seizure disorder, if she had seizure symptoms during one of those 19 visits, that might have come up? But there's zero evidence that that was ever raised. No evidence of symptoms, no evidence of diagnosis. What Vertez saw, which is, again, Zion briefly closing her eyes, could have literally been nothing. Could have been nothing. Could have been anything at all. But if it was a seizure, it was what Dr. Lavity described as an absent seizure, which are basically harmless. They don't cause sudden death. They're common and they don't cause kids to die. And there were no symptoms described that she had any type of serious seizure or had ever experienced a serious seizure. And isn't it interesting that none of the defendant's statements, the defendant described this incident multiple times and made claims about how Zion died. He never described her having symptoms of a seizure, not once in any of the multiple opportunities he described what happened. And isn't it interesting that the defendant himself says that he has seizures? Listen to this.
I have seizures, so I get really stressed. My heart calculations and heart rate, so it messes with me. So I usually have weed just to think for later.
He mentions that on January 19th. He mentions it again on June 10th. Don't you think that someone who has seizures, if what he had seen was anything remotely looking like a seizure, in one of these 3 statements that he made, he would have said that. He would have offered that as a potential explanation, but he didn't. Because this is nothing but a sideshow and a distraction. It's nothing but part of a pattern of shifting explanations to defend the indefensible. He got rid of Zion's body to conceal that he murdered her. That's the bottom line. He didn't get rid of her body to hide a death by COVID, a death by Prozac, a death by suicide, a death by seizure, or any of the other nonsense you've heard. He got rid of her body because he murdered her. That is why people get rid of bodies. Period. Full stop. And what really tells us that is that we see in these prison communications when that landfill search is winding down that he never wanted her body found. Think about this. If he was being truthful, if Zion really died of natural causes, finding her body would have exonerated him. He should have been out there digging with a doggone hard hat and a hazmat suit on to try to find her body. But what do we find in his communications? We find on January 25th, he says, I should have literally never went to the damn police department. That's literally all I had to do was nothing.
She's crazy. I said, you literally never went to the police department. Like, that's literally all I had to do was nothing.
No. If he was innocent, what he should have done, if this really was some momentary panic that he had that night, he should have made sure her body was found the very next morning, because that would have exonerated him. Instead, he waited until she was gone, and he did everything he could to cover up what he did. That is not the behavior of somebody who is innocent. And then we have these messages that were found on a phone that he, by all appearances, had in a prison cell with him in October of 2022. Hundreds of messages between him and Katrina Smith, some of which touch on this case. And you can see in these messages, he's sending selfies of himself. There's no question that it's him in these messages. He was at the Macomb Correctional Facility at the time of these messages. The phone was right in the area of the Macomb Correctional Facility at the time he was sending these messages. And what do we have? On October 1st of 2022, he gets a call from Katrina Smith. He gets a call saying that there's a detective who's asking around again. And this is a critical time because this is right when the landfill search is winding down. This is an important time. And this is when you can start to see for the first time a sense of nervousness, a sense of panic in him. And she tells him that this detective is asking around. And there's another call right after this where he calls her back and he asks her, is it anything like the one major thing it could be? Is it major? She reassures him no. Take a listen.
So, I'm sick. Are you okay, first off?
Yes, I'm fine.
Okay, is it anything major?
Huh? No.
What, hello?
Hello?
Yeah, is it anything, like the one major thing it could be, is it major?
No.
Okay.
But
So,
it's just a heads up, please.
And the rest of this call is telling, because in the rest of this call, he highlights his concern that he's been thinking about this. He's been up thinking so critically, he says, trying to decipher what's going on. And then he puts his theories out there about what's going on in the investigation.
I'm saying,
yeah, you're so terrible. Oh my God, you're so
I know,
terrible.
because I know.
I know, baby, I know.
But
I've been here thinking so critically. I literally, I was sitting in the day room, literally, because I don't know why I can think better when I'm around a lot of noise in here. So I'm sitting in there just tackling, and now I got a fucking migraine. So I'm just like deciphering certain shit. Oh man, while waiting for this other thing. But yeah, my assumption there, the most logical and possible one, right? Is that there's nothing major or new, and due to that, there's a lack put together any types of anything. And that's basically the most logical thing that I came up statistically. So,
I do want you to know, keep your head up. Don't say nothing. You could be
of course. Baby, stop talking.
I know, I'm just saying.
I just don't want you speaking on certain things. Okay.
And then from there, they get into this issue of, he tells her his brain works a lot off of statistics and probabilities, like the type of thinking that would tell you if you throw someone's body away and that body ends up in a landfill, it's probably never going to be found. Your secret's probably going to be buried forever. And he tells her that he doesn't feel the need to really go anywhere with it. And then he talks about, in code, today's the 1st, tomorrow is the 2nd, October 1st and October 2nd. And that's when they're going to stop searching for COVID, he says. But he's not talking about a search for COVID. He's talking about the search for the body. Listen.
Anything over my brain works a lot on statistics and probability, so I don't feel the need or foresee the need to really go anywhere with it. Yeah, just relax. Today is the 1st, tomorrow's the 2nd. That's what if it's to stop the COVID thing in here. Stop searching for COVID essentially. And usually you usually get an update before that. But actually nothing. So don't worry about nothing. Just continue on with nothing and what you're doing, okay?
I'm not worried. I'm just giving you a.
Yeah, I know, baby, and I appreciate it. There's no need to go, trust me. My mental state is so far ahead of shit.
He's talking about the search for the body, and he's hoping that body never gets found. And the very next day, there's this series of communications that culminates with him sending Katrina Smith this link to an article entitled, "If I'm a suspect in a murder but no body is ever found, can I be charged?" The very next day after having that phone call about the search for COVID, as he says, being suspended, he sends her this, and he follows up by saying, "I know, baby, and it's okay. I plan out every step, so relax. And the attachment I just sent is the main one. There is nothing to be worried about." Because he thinks that his secret is buried in that landfill forever. He thinks he didn't leave behind all this evidence. He thinks that people like Katrina Smith are never going to come to court to testify against him. But he's wrong. And he gets charged. He gets charged with second-degree murder and tampering with evidence. Just want to briefly touch on the elements of second-degree murder. You're going to get a full instruction from the judge on those elements. But in a nutshell, there's two of them. One is that he caused Zion Foster's death. Two is that he did so with a particular state of mind. And there's one of three state of minds that applies to second-degree murder: an intent to kill, an intent to do great bodily harm, or knowingly creating a very high risk of death or great bodily harm, knowing that death or such harm would be the likely result of his actions. You're going to get this instruction that says when it comes to intent, when it comes to state of mind, you can and you should look to all the circumstances in this case. You can't read minds, so we have to look to the circumstances to tell what his intent was. And you're going to get this instruction on circumstantial evidence that says that circumstantial evidence by itself can be used to prove the elements of the crimes. And again, these are the circumstances that I just walked through. These are the circumstances that tell us that he caused Zion Foster's death, and that when he did that, he meant to kill her, or at least he meant to hurt her. And I want to boil this down in a list, because I know this can be a little bit confusing to look at. But if we just boil it down to this list of factors, these are the factors, these are the circumstances that show that this is murder, just in the most basic form. Number one, he groomed her. This was an inappropriate relationship that he was developing with her. Number two, he brought her to his home late at night behind his girlfriend's back. Number 3, he disposed of her body. And after doing that, according to his own girlfriend, he was calm and collected, and he had an unexplained gash on him, which is evidence of violence happening in that home that night. Number 4, he obstructed justice through, among other things, wiping his phone, lying to the police and others, and interfering with these witnesses and their testimony. And number 5, he came up with this story, this supposedly innocent explanation for what happened. Yet that story was inconsistent in key ways. He couldn't keep it straight. It was full of lies on key issues. The story was implausible. And he openly acknowledged that he wanted to recant that story. And the final factor is that he never wanted her body found. All of these factors tell us that these elements are met, that this was a murder. This wasn't some death by accident. This was a murder. He's also charged with tampering with evidence, which includes some elements, including that there was some evidence to be offered in a present or future official proceeding. You've heard throughout this case, and I'm going to echo it again, that the single most important piece of evidence in this case would have been Zion Foster's body. That was evidence that would have been offered in a court proceeding, like this trial or like the preliminary examination. The second element is that the defendant removed, altered, concealed, destroyed, or otherwise tampered with that evidence. He admitted to doing that. That's the one thing that he admitted to doing in this case. 3 is that it's on purpose. He admitted to doing that too. 4 is that the evidence was to be used in a criminal case punishable by more than 10 years, which murder is an offense that's punishable by more than 10 years. Ladies and gentlemen, the defendant is guilty of these 2 offenses. I'm going to sit down in a minute here. I'm going to have another opportunity to address you. But when Mr. Brown is speaking, I want you to think about these factors. Think about how he can overcome any of that and try to justify what Jaylin Brazier did. There's no justification. There's no excuse for what he did. He murdered her, and I'm asking you to find him guilty as such. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your time and your attention to this particular case. I know it's been very long. However, as stated at jury voir dire, Mr. Elsie was indicating that this case was based upon circumstantial evidence. I disagree. His whole case is based upon theories, hypotheses, innuendos, assumptions, gut feelings, hairs on the back of your neck, but without evidence to prove that, in fact, Jaylin Brazier caused the death of Zion Foster. Now, we do know that Zion Foster, unfortunately, is not here. However, we have to look back into the history of the situation. First and foremost, we've heard from Zion Foster's mother, Sierra Milton, who testified numerous times. At one point in time, at a preliminary examination, she testified that she couldn't remember whether or not Zion Foster was on antidepressants or had seen a psychiatrist for depression. Repeatedly, she was asked of this. She indicated she couldn't remember. And with a little bit of arm twisting, she said, oh, yes, let me be honest, I remember taking her months before this particular incident. Now, how can somebody forget taking their daughter to a psychiatrist for depression? There had to be some serious enough issues that Zion Foster was facing in order for her to go there. Now, we're not suggesting that Zion killed herself. That was never a theory of the defense, that Zion killed herself that night. But it does go to her state of mind. The prosecution would like you to believe that she was a totally healthy individual. No, she wasn't physically healthy, and unfortunately, she wasn't mentally healthy at the time. Now, there was testimony that she had been molested or raped, and her family knew about it, and allegedly they believed her, but they never went to the police. So this would affect her state of mind. She ran away multiple times. At one point in time for 2 months. And her own mother indicated that she didn't even know the friend that well she was staying with. Who knows what she's doing over there, who she's interacting with, what type of drugs she's doing over there, if she's having seizures over there to not be observed. How would she know? She's not there. We asked her, do you know what type of substance could have been in her marijuana? Did you check it? No, I never checked her marijuana. Did you administer her prescription medication to her at the exam? No, I didn't. Did you supervise her when she took her medication? No, I didn't. But when she gets in the chair in front of you, she states, oh, yes, I administered it. I observed her. And I asked her, confronted her like, hey, with her transcript from the preliminary examination, these specific questions were asked of you, and you said no. Oh, I was confused. I don't think it's very confusing if you saw somebody take their medication and if you gave it to them. Very easy questions. So we don't know whether or not she was taking her medication, whether or not she was took over the dosage, whether or not she was mixing it with other substances. We don't know. However, we did hear multiple times from Vertez Gonzalez, her boyfriend. What do we know? The day she was at work, what did she state? I have the worst headache in the world. Not just, oh, my head hurts a little bit. The worst headache in the world. The qualifier, worse than any headache before. And this was prior to her leaving. She also told Vertez, don't ping me. Don't ping me. I'm at work. Don't ping me. Which she didn't want her phone going off. She then left and went over to Jaylin's house. What did Jaylin tell the police? What did Vertez tell the police? She sounded very tired. She sounded very tired, very consistent with both of them. What did Dr. Lavities indicate? Some pre-ictal signs of a seizure could be a headache and fatigue. Multiple times she went to the hospital for fatigue and headache. At one point in time, she indicated that she couldn't feel her heart. She didn't know if her heart was beating. Same thing Jaylin said. Now, Dr. Lavity testified that it happens. And we all know common sense would lend us to believe and know for a fact that hospitals sometimes misdiagnose and undiagnose certain conditions. So if she's repeatedly coming to the hospital for fatigue and or a headache, could be an underlying cause, and it could be contributed to her having seizures that was not diagnosed. The doctor indicated that there's a very specific test that must be generated in order to see whether or not somebody is even having seizures. And that is a test where it goes on their brain waves, something that cannot be detected after death, only during. Now, whether or not she had a history of seizures, we don't know, because obviously the doctor didn't do a thorough analysis of her medical records. She didn't even know at the preliminary examination that Zion was taking antidepressants. I had to confront her with that. And she said she didn't know. Nor did she know at the preliminary examination that Zion had a history of seizures. She said she did not know. She also indicated had she known, it would have made a difference in her opinion. Now, the prosecution wants to show you her opinion letter, but that was with insufficient and incomplete evidence based upon Zion's medical conditions and or medical records. And what do we know? After she retrieved that information, there was never a request by the prosecution and or the officer in charge to say, hey, now that we have this new information that was established at the exam, could you give another analysis, including those particular issues and the probability of that causing Zion Foster to have death? That was never asked. Why? because they didn't want that truth to be known, because it didn't fit their hypothesis or their theory. It's the truth. They didn't want it because it didn't fit. So therefore, that discussion was never even had by the doctor. The only reason it was mentioned by the prosecution at trial, because he know it was elicited at the preliminary examination, and the doctor said it was a probable cause for Zion's death of a seizure. Now, they want you to believe that, oh, Zion, if she had a seizure, even though Vertez himself said Zion told him specifically she had a history of seizures. The question was asked, were you concerned when you saw this? No, I was not concerned, because I knew of a history of seizures she told me about, and that she was on medication for it. And his understanding is that if she did not take the medication, the seizures would be that much worse. Dr. Lavity testified to the same thing. If somebody is not on seizure medication who should be, it could be that much worse. She also indicated that every seizure above absent seizure, short of grand mal seizures, would be consistent with having the same characteristics. She indicated that a seizure that could cause death, somebody can attribute characteristics of their dozing off, and they could die within their seizure. She also indicated that the time for somebody dying within a seizure could be very short. It could be the time span of somebody leaving the room and walking back. Now, the prosecution wants you to believe that, oh, just because Mr. Brazier had a history of seizures, he should have known that she was having a seizure and told them that. How would he know? Some of the characteristics she described could just be a nodding off. The only type of seizures really where body parts are flailing are grand mal seizures. That's not the most common seizure that a person may attribute. That may be the most common that we think of when we think of seizures. But she indicated a lot of seizures that cause death do not necessarily have those particular characteristics. Now, we don't know if she had a history of seizures. That could have been buried in the 638 pages. Now, the doctor tried to indicate that, oh, she didn't find this out, or there was two separate sets of medical records. And even the prosecution had to confront her and say, hey, on your original opinion letter, it says your opinion is based upon 638 pages of medical records, correct? Yes. And if you look at this exhibit, which was her medical records, doctor, how many pages is this? 638. So did you get a second list of medical records? No, I didn't. Why would the doctor try to insinuate she did? Why wouldn't she just tell the truth at first that, hey, I didn't look through it. I didn't do my job thoroughly. When I made my opinion, I just leisurely browsed through the medical records, didn't take the time and effort to give you an accurate opinion based upon my thorough analysis and review of the records. No, she tried to insinuate that I had, or she had other records that were sent to her, which was false. Now, the prosecution wants you to believe that Mr. Brazier had some deep gash on him with blood squirting out, even though we heard from Katrina that this cat was boxed off, sanctioned off, quarantined off from children and other people because this cat had a propensity and a history of scratching people. She said this. Now, I don't know why Sergeant Jones wouldn't take pictures of Jaylin, of telling him to take his clothes off and take photographs. If this gash was so deep as they want you to believe, he'd still have it right now. Surely he would have had it when he went to the police station. Why wouldn't they photograph him? To prove whether or not how deep this gash, or was it just a scratch on him from a cat? Cannot prove this. They have the burden of proof. It's just a theory with no evidence support that, even though they had the chance. Now, Jaylin went in voluntarily to the police station with a lawyer. We've heard testimony that the lawyer repeatedly tried to contact prosecutors. Multiple prosecutors tried to contact the detective from Eastpointe, contacted the detective from the homicide, went in, made a statement, and repeatedly said before he put her in the trunk that there was no breathing. He just showed you in his own exhibit. The breathing was not there. No form of life at all. Now, what does Sergeant Jones do? She types up a statement that's not reflective of what he said consistently, that she was not breathing. There was no heartbeat. And she takes up a statement to the contrary. While he's gone with his lawyer, and then in the presence with no video, presents this to his lawyer and Mr. Brazier, and his lawyer at the time had to say, hey, this is not what he said. This is not reflective in the statement, and had to write what really happened during that particular interview and initial it. Now, why would she leave that key detail out? And she states that, oh, she had an opportunity to review and look at her notes before she typed up that statement, but left out that key. Why? Because it didn't fit her theory or her hypothesis. We saw videos and we saw footage. We saw pictures of this particular house. Jaylin said that some marijuana was in an orange jar. What did we see under the table? An orange jar consistent with being marijuana. Nobody collected this. Nobody know. Who took the pictures then? Did the pictures take themselves? The pictures were done pursuant to a search warrant. Why wasn't this evidence collected? It was after Jaylin's interview with the police. It wasn't before. They want you to suggest that it was before. Sergeant Jones testified that she was there, but she tried to point the blame on to the FBI as to why certain things weren't collected, why certain things weren't analyzed for DNA, such as a table upstairs, downstairs. She stated that she was the officer in charge at the time, but she was relying on the FBI or other individuals who were there. But as the officer in charge, this is your job. Like, who's driving this investigation? It's like a Tesla investigation on autopilot. We then heard from the FBI agent who processed the house, who indicated this is an FBI agent. He's very thorough. He indicated there was no evidence that would suggest that any evidence was moved around or cleaned up. And I know the prosecutor is going to suggest, oh, there's something that was moved, the body. There was no evidence that suggests that Mr. Brazier tried to clean this particular scene or anything. There was no blood. There was no saliva. They have luminol to detect saliva. Hagner testified that saliva can persist, and it does persist. That's why they have luminol in order to detect it. They have alternative light source in order to detect blood. Check the carpets, check the couches, the walls, integral little places that a person would not be able to realize. These are forensic experts. They're trained to look for details where a regular person would not know, and to look to clean up or to disregard certain evidence. We also heard the processing of Jaylin's car. We saw pictures of this car. His car was dirty. The trunk was dirty. Obviously, there was no attempt to discard or take anything that previously was in this particular trunk. We heard from Trooper Yunt, who testified that his dog, Jameson, who has a perfect record, never's wrong, indicated on this particular card. Never false indication at all, ever. And I asked them, if there's a situation where your dog indicates on the car, and then there's an analysis afterwards where they bring the luminol, they bring the alternative light source, they send it to the Michigan State Police Crime Lab for analysis, and no blood, no DNA, no saliva whatsoever turns up in those analyses, could Jamison possibly be wrong? Oh, no, Jamison's right. Jamison's more correct than anybody. He testified at the preliminary examination that allegedly Jamison could detect blood in 1 part in 12,000. That's what he said in August of 2023. He got up on the stand, and now Jamison can allegedly detect blood 1 part per 1 million. Even though he himself stated that he's been out of work for 3 months, or up until, I guess, currently. So in the span from the preliminary examination until roughly around January, Jamison escalated his ability from 1 part 12,000 to 1 part 1 million. I said, do you have any documentation to support that? Oh yeah, I sent that. Who did he send it? He didn't send it to me. Surely he would have sent it to the prosecutor. They would have put that on the screen that, oh, these are Jamison's credentials. This is the documentation I received from from Trooper Young to substantiate his testimony. No, he's throwing numbers out there and didn't want to come clean and admit that, okay, I could be wrong. Maybe I misspoke. Maybe Jamison is not as good as I may think or hope him to be. I'm sure Jamison is very thorough in his job. And if Jamison is so thorough, why wouldn't they take the individual items out the truck and see if Jamison identified or indicated on each of them? Why not take out the shirts or the clothes or the whatever's in the trunk and see if Jamison indicate on those specific items? And once those items were taken out, why was it those individual items analyzed with luminol? Why weren't those individual items analyzed with the alternative light source? Why would they turn upside down? That's what I would have done to be thorough. Maybe that didn't fit their hypothesis of what happened. Then they send this information up to Michigan State Police. Hagner testified that, yes, he would have wanted these items. He would have wanted to analyze these items for blood, for DNA. Why weren't they sent? We asked the OIC, and she didn't really want to answer the question. She was saying, oh, we're part of a team, or, same thing Sergeant Jones was doing, kind of trying to pass the blame. But it's like, you're the officer in charge. In charge is in your title, officer in charge. So you have the authority. Ask her a very specific question. Do you have the authority? Did you have the authority to send these up? Oh, we're part of a team. If you want to get to the truth of the matter, you analyze all the evidence. If you think something had happened, you analyze to make sure to see, in fact, if it did happen. And the only way to do that, to prove it, is with evidence, not with these theories and hypotheses that can't be supported, that could possibly have been proven one way or another if they were thoroughly analyzed. Now, the detective stated that she didn't know to ask, or she doesn't know about the different, items or tools that they have to analyze at the Michigan State Police. Like, how would you not familiarize yourself with what tactics or tools they have in order to analyze? If you're the officer in charge for a detective, for a homicide, you would think you would know what type of tools or procedures they undergo at Michigan State Police Crime Lab in order for you to know, okay, whether or not I'm going to collect this particular item, because they have this particular tool that can analyze and give me a result or a probability on that. Why would you ever ask the individual, do you have a machine that can magnify? If you're looking for specific hair samples or blood samples, why wouldn't you have a machine? Now, Hagner testified at some point in time he did have that machine. Why wasn't there ever an inquiry about that? Surely if the OIC were to inquire, do you have such a machine? Like I asked, I'm not a detective, but it came in my mind that, hey, do you have this machine? Surely if she would have inquired about this, when they received this machine, they would have notified like, hey, yes, we have a machine, or at the very least, they would have sought out a machine. Because surely a machine like this didn't just come into existence at all. Surely this machine would have existed way prior to the inception of this particular case. Now, as far as Jaylin, like I stated, voluntarily came into the police station. When he was first confronted, he was confronted by Zion's mother and an unknown male. Now, would he have felt threatened? More than likely so. We heard from Katrina that she was being threatened. The mother was being threatened to the fact where they threatened to cut Katrina's baby out of her stomach just so they can make Jaylin feel some type of pain. So of course, I would be nervous too if somebody's threatening my family, and if I go into jail, if they lock me up for whatever reason, I can't even protect my family. I can't protect my children. We heard testimony from his brother, who his mother asked the brother to let Jaylin and the family come over there just so that they could be out of harm's way, because out of all the threats they were getting, and not to mention the publicity this case was given. So of course Katrina wouldn't want her face plastered across the TV screen, because there are individuals who are threatening her who she doesn't know their identity, but now they know her identity. Not only do they know her name, social media, how she looks. So it could just be who she thinks a random stranger in the supermarket, at the gas station, at a red light, who knows her, who's targeting her, and does something. And who would know? The OIC did no investigation. She stated that from her understanding, it was from social media. Now they dug up everything from Jaylin's social media, so we know clearly she has the ability to research social media. And a potential witness is being threatened with death in a serious case, and you don't do an investigation? You don't follow up? You don't even review the interview with the mother to see? You don't check if there's any police reports on the mother at all? But then you state it's your duty because you allegedly hear on the phone call that Jaylin is talking to his girlfriend and she disciplines the child and the child cries, and then you contact CPS. You want us to believe that, oh, you were just so concerned this wasn't a tactic to try to blackmail her to come in and testify? Oh, we have to use our common sense. We know this was. She wasn't that concerned. If you're so concerned about Katrina and their family's well-being, you would have surely followed up on some death threats. You would have just said, oh, it's the police precinct's duty to do that. So you just look the other way, but you have a duty to report that wasn't even child abuse. They instantly closed this case. You whoop a child on the butt, of course the child is going to cry. There was no evidence that she abused this child or hit the child, in the face or anything like that. It was just a tactic that the police used to try to blackmail you into getting it. So of course she felt intimidated. She didn't want to lose her child, so of course she's going to come in here and try to give the police what she thinks they want. She feels her freedom is in jeopardy. They just arrested her. She just got out of jail prior to her testimony. She was arrested. For what? They didn't arrest nobody else to make them come in. She appeared at the preliminary examination. The conversations between her and Jaylin were for her safety. He said, if you don't have to, don't come, because the cameras are going to be on her. He didn't say don't. He didn't say reject the subpoena. And she was like, oh, they might subpoena me. Like, if you don't have to come, then don't. If you don't have to, but if you have to, meaning the subpoena's issue, then come. But I don't want you here with the family who've already threatened you, could follow you to your car. I'm caring about your well-being. Your face is being publicized on the TV screen. So he's caring about her well-being. It wasn't an attempt to not get her to come. He said, if you don't have to, meaning I don't want you sitting here every single day watching this trial, the stress on you, the publicity on you, and possibly the threats and harm that may come to your life. Now, at some point in time, he's in jail. Everybody's accusing him of doing this. Everybody's in there assuming and their hypothesis, even though no evidence, they're saying he did this. Everybody's pointing the finger at him. So of course he's researching. Of course he's like, dang, can I be charged with somebody's death? Like, what do you need to be charged with death? Like, I'm not charged right now, but people are saying that they're going to charge me. People are pointing the finger at me. They're accusing me. They're saying they're going to harm me. So of course I'm going to do some research. And then they're trying to use my statements. At first, yes, I told her I didn't see him because I wanted to secure my family. I wanted to get a lawyer before I went into the police station. So I didn't want to tell the family right then and there, yeah, I seen her, she died here. He's not a doctor. He didn't know what happened. He didn't know what pre-existing conditions. Let the prosecutor tell you, they didn't know nobody. I didn't know. The doctor knew. Nobody knew about Zion's history. Now, they had a very close relationship. There's thousands of text messages between the two of them, back and forth about multiple different issues. About Zion's talking about this guy, her past boyfriend, her other boyfriend, the boyfriend you dropped me off. He took her over to one of her ex-boyfriend's house, not Cortez. So she was dating multiple people at the time. She sends him a explicit picture and he responds like, oh, I'm not even gonna open that. Now we're both scarred. But the prosecutor doesn't show you that. They don't show you the first text message that was sent by her of a naked lady. That's the type of relationship they had. They talked about smoking weed. They talked about each other's relationships. They were like friends. And a female and a male can have a relationship where they talk about a multitude of issues. Never in those thousands of texts did he say, oh, I want to do this to you. She talked about some guy giving her head or wanting to give her head, about being over this guy's house and not taking a pill. He said, welcome to parenthood. They talked about a multitude of issues. They smoked multiple times. They were just that type of relationship. And then he wants to suggest you that he was grooming her? Not at all. They were talking back and forth. He never said, send me a picture of you. Send me a picture. What are you wearing? Send me a picture of you in those, in that bra. Send me a picture of you in them panties. Never, nothing like that. Nothing even remotely close to that. It was just like two guys. Now, had she been a guy and they talked about the same things, and he talking about, oh, I'm getting head. She talking about, oh, I just got head last night. And there was another guy, would he still have the same suggestion? No. But just because she's a female, he's trying to suggest that this happened? That he was grooming her or he had a sexual attraction to her? Absolutely not. These text messages span for years. They go back years, and never once was there any insinuation that Jaylin wanted her to do some sexual act to her, to him, or he wanted to do one to her. No evidence whatsoever. Whatsoever.
he searches what happens if I recant my statement, the pros and cons. This is afterwards. He knows that the prosecution is going to show evidence of him going, the police arriving at his house, stating that, okay, I didn't see her. Of course, this was pre-lawyer. They're going to use that against him. So he said, okay, what are the pros and cons? In other words, I mean, he's not an expert researcher, so he's not going to know the exact terms. He's going to say that they said I recanted my statement, my earlier statement to the police about not seeing her, but then I came in and I told them. I told them what happened. They didn't come get me. They didn't have an arrest warrant. I came there and I told them what happened, which he did, which he had a right to counsel, and he had counsel with them, and he told the truth. Now, I'm sure this is a traumatic incident, and at the same time, he was under the influence of marijuana, so obviously he wasn't thinking clearly. He didn't have a notepad to jot down notes, and we heard the interview. The interview was somewhat confusing at times because the detective Reinhold kept asking him, no. So what happened, the first time she said she was tired. And so Jaylin's trying to explain the ultimate what happened. The moment before he put her into the trunk, she wasn't breathing. And then he's like, no, what happened prior to that, when you went to go get the water, when she was feeling tired, when you was like, it was shallow breathing before you waited 15, 20 minutes. So it's kind of confusing as to what time period was he talking about? The moment right before he put her into the trunk, or when he first noticed the shallow breathing and faint heartbeat, and he gave him about 10, 15 minutes before he came back, and then realized that there was no heartbeat and there was no breathing, which he was very consistent on, even though Sergeant Jones left it out her report. He was very consistent on that. Now, did he have a notepad in his hand to take notes? And did he have a stopwatch to say, okay, exactly 9 minutes and 45 seconds has passed from the moment that she said A, B, and C? No, he did not. He tried to remember the best he could, given the traumatic situation. Now, he admitted to panicking because he didn't know she had a history of seizures. I mean, he's doing drugs. How many people have been charged, or if you've heard people being charged of doing drugs with somebody, providing drugs to somebody, and them being charged with murder? If you give somebody fentanyl, or you give somebody some type of drug and they overdose, you're being charged. Now, he's not a lawyer. He doesn't know the ins and outs, but I'm sure we've all heard of stories where either a drug dealer, a drug user, has been charged with murder by sharing drugs with somebody else. So at the point in time, he's paranoid, he panics. He doesn't know what happened. All he knows is he was doing drugs, which is still federally illegal, even though the prosecutor tried to get the special agent to say, oh, I've never heard of nobody being prosecuted. But then again, how would you know? How would you know? You're an FBI agent, you're not a DE agent. The U.S. attorney wouldn't contact you and say, hey, I'm prosecuting somebody for possession of marijuana. I mean, he wouldn't know that. And then a lay person surely wouldn't know this information. So he panicked. Now, the prosecutor wants to suggest that he changed his clothes. Why would he change his clothes? Is he suggesting he changed his clothes because his clothes were all bloody? Is that the suggestion why he changed his clothes? Because there was a very thorough analysis of the house by FBI, by detectives. There was no blood, no DNA, no bodily fluids. I don't know if he's suggesting that she was strangled, where some people release their bodily fluids if being strangled. So I don't know what he's suggesting, especially with the statement that he changed his clothes. He took a shower. Now, surely if your favorite cousin just died in front of you, that would blow my mind. That would have me in a panic where I'm like, man, I need to gather myself. Like, what just happened? What just happened? And if somebody did research what are the force of a traffic accident, I would possibly do the same thing. Like, man, did I just do what I thought I did? And then he tried to suggest that there was no conversation about 911. That was obvious. We spoke with Lieutenant Sullivan, and he indicated yes. He indicated yes. He's asked about 911. It's in the transcript. Now, the truth is not being disclosed the way it should. Exhibit 55. I wish I would have called 911. I didn't know any of that. That's my exact thought. I'm like, okay, call 911. And I'm like, what if they be like, you did this? He panicked. That was speaking of 911. He wasn't thinking in his right mind, and he made an improper, bad decision. And he thought about it afterwards, like, man, my favorite cousin, I just put her here. So of course you're going to think about what kind of force a trash compactor has. Or what did I just do to my cousin? Like, Dad, what did I just do? I mean, he's feeling remorse about it. That's why he eventually came to the police. They didn't come to him. He came to the police and told them. They didn't know this. And then we heard from Sergeant Jones, that was credible what he said. He didn't take him on a wild goose chase. How would he know that she wouldn't be found at the dumpster? I mean, at the trash heap. How would he know that? How would he know that? He didn't take him to an incorrect dumpster. He didn't say, oh, I threw her into a lake. He didn't take him on a wild goose chase. He told them. And they, I guess, believed them because it matched with his phone evidence. It matched the video evidence. Now, when the detective who extracted this video, he testified, they tried to show you a car and insinuate that that was Jaylin's car. Try to insinuate that this was Jaylin's car, asking the question, oh, this time corresponds with this. It happened to be a white car, but they was hoping that you didn't notice that. But then when I confronted the OIC, he's like, oh yeah, that ain't the right car. Yeah, that's not the wrong car. But was that mentioned during the testimony of the detective? No. They try to insinuate that this was Jaylin's car coming back to the scene, checking the trash can, which it was not. And then now they're trying to say, oh, there's a lot of activity. They got the video camera right on there. Show me. It's hours and hours upon hours of video footage of multiple people coming there doing illegal dumping. A lot of people come to these trash cans and illegally dump. If you watch the video, you'll see multitude of individuals coming to the same dumpster, putting things in the trash can. No evidence whatsoever that Jaylin went back to this particular trash can and looked in. None at all. That's just their hypothesis, their theory, but cannot be supported by any evidence that they have demonstrated at all during this particular trial. Now, if Zion's body was found, there still would not be a conclusive evidence that could be determined that she had a seizure. We heard from Dr. Lavity that if somebody dies of a seizure, there's no way post-mortem after death to determine whether or not they died from a seizure. Prosecutor would like you to believe that, oh, they would have been able to find anything. No, not that. Which we believe that is the reason that Zion Foster passed away that particular day. And if somebody's smoking weed or doing drugs and out the blue, somebody just dies from a pre-existing condition that they might not know, I mean, it's reasonable for them to panic. Now, as far as putting the body in the trunk, that was a bad decision. But that does not mean that he caused the death. And the prosecutor has not proven beyond a reasonable doubt that, in fact, Jaylin caused the death. Because it is very reasonable, based upon the testimony from Vertaz, that he knew she had a history of seizures. Not just one passing out, he knew prior seizures, and they could be worse. We also don't know whether or not in those medical records there is a history of seizures, because nobody thoroughly analyzed it. The detectives didn't, the prosecution didn't, and obviously the doctor whose only job, she did not thoroughly analyze. Found out on the stand about the drugs. So clearly she didn't look deep enough. And maybe if she had additional time, she would have said, oh, by the way, I do see that she was treated for seizures. But nevertheless, she did indicate that there is history and a probability of it being undiagnosed, because some of the symptoms that she was going to the hospital for are attributable to individuals who have seizures. Some of the characteristics she described that particular night: the worst headache in the world, sounding tired per Vertaz, sounding tired or being very tired per Jaylin, consistent with being fatigued, which is a pre-ictal sign of a seizure. Now, had Zion died of a seizure, a natural cause, there would have never been any type of court proceedings. If somebody dies of a natural cause, there's no court proceedings. So if the evidence shows that there's a high probability that she died of a seizure, and if that's reasonable, and it is, then the prosecution cannot meet their burden beyond a reasonable doubt, because there is reasonable doubt that still exists. Now, they want you to go on their theories and their hypotheticals and just sweep under the rug what the doctor said, what Vertaz said, try to minimize it. The OIC testified that she spoke to a follow-up interview with Vertaz about these seizures. However, this wasn't videotaped. This wasn't recorded. I didn't even know about it to myself to even question Vertaz about this. This particular important issue of whether or not he had a seizure, you wouldn't record, you wouldn't take notes about this, and you heard him testify in court about having seizures, and not just one, multiple seizures, and you don't think that's important enough to detail? If she died of a seizure, which I believe she did, never did we advance suicide. We never indicated that. We just indicated there's a possibility that she may have been on other drugs due to her condition of trying to self-medicate. I don't know. We don't know if she was on other drugs. We don't know if there was fentanyl or anything else in it. I don't know if it was an overdose. More than likely, it was a seizure based upon all the conditions and characteristics that we heard. And whether or not Jaylin would have noticed that, like I stated, the doctors indicated that some seizures that are deadly and rise above an absent seizure have the same characteristics, such as somebody nodding off and having a seizure. So if there was a seizure, there would be no type of criminal proceeding. So if she died of a seizure, per the law, if Jaylin disposed of her after she was already dead and put her in the trunk of the car, he is not disposing of evidence that will be used in a criminal proceeding. Because if it's a seizure, a natural cause, there is no case. There is no penalty over 10 years. If somebody has a heart attack, somebody has a seizure, a brain aneurysm, or whatever the case, there is no criminal proceeding. We also heard that Zion had Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which was a symptom or a condition that affected the cardiovascular system, that affected the heart. We also know she went to the doctor multiple times complaining about heart palpitations and not being able to feel her heartbeat. Doctor also indicated that a seizure could be caused by a cardiovascular. Now, the doctor tried to theorize and have a hypothesis that, oh, this Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, EDS, was misdiagnosed. Now that's beyond her expertise. She's a forensic pathologist. There's no evidence whatsoever that a doctor misdiagnosed her on this particular condition. There's no evidence that suggests that this particular condition was ever cured. And I believe it was still existing in Zion. And it could have been the cause of her seizures, and at the very least contributed to her having a seizure, causing her death that particular night. Now, they tried to show all these different searches of porn that they say was cousin related. 27 out of 1,154. A year after this happened, after he was incarcerated, after he was in jail, he was in jail. Why wouldn't he look at porn? Now, they didn't want to show you all the other searches. Detective Sergeant Markle, Detective Franti, neither one of them looked at the whole extraction report to determine how many porn entries there were. Now, Detective Franti, who wasn't even certified, wasn't even an expert, why would you even bring him to testify about an extraction and he's not even certified to do it? He testified that he didn't even look at xvideos.com. And after he testified, he was sitting in a chair and he went home the night of trial to look on Xvideos to try to verify whether or not how that website works. You were sent this years ago. Or months ago, well, actually years ago, this information, and you never analyzed it? You never did your job to analyze it? You never went on the website to see whether or not K equals something? You say you went onto a form, you never went to verify it prior, and then you went that particular night, didn't take any notes, didn't take any screenshots, you just allegedly went that particular night to search. They don't want you to know the whole truth because it doesn't fit their theory and their hypothesis that Jaylin had thousands of porn, super unrelated. And then they try to opine about a quote unquote rape porn. This is a porn, this is actors in there. Well, no rape porn. That's why we didn't see it. It's just her opinion. Her opinion of
Judge,
her watching.
objection. There is a reason we didn't see that, and it is not that.
Sustained.
Nevertheless, this is her opinion of what it shows.
The judge, objection. He can't mischaracterize what the video shows. We can't
This
show the
is
jury
her-
that video.
He's
He's making a lie, right? I mean, he's
Okay.
blatantly lying.
All right.
No.
All right. Ms. Charles, you can cover this in rebuttal.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor.
She detailed what she saw on this particular video. This is her characteristic of this particular video, of what she watched the video and what her opinion of what the video depicted. Nevertheless, this was over a year after Jaylin's last statement in June of 2022. These porn, regular porn, not no snuff films, nothing illegal, not no child porn, nothing illegal about these searches were over a year later. Jaylin's first interview was January 19th. His second interview was January 20th. His last interview was June 10th. Why wasn't he arrested? They want to literally, have you believe that there was some smoking gun that came forth in between that time for them to arrest Jaylin? Some witness came forward or somebody, some newfound evidence. He told them everything of what they presented then and there. He came in and surrendered and told them, okay, this is what happened. This is what I did in the early onset of this particular investigation. They want you to do their job. Dr. Laverty to do their job. The OIC. Certain things weren't said. Nobody thoroughly did their job, and it's an investigation to let us know the complete truth. They promised you all these things. They promised you, oh, it's like a bag of Cheetos if it goes missing, and then you find the crumb, you find the bag, you go question your child, then their hands are covered with Cheetos, or their mouth is covered with Cheetos, and then you assume it's them. Where's the Cheetos on the hands? Where's the Cheetos on the mouth? All they know is the bag is missing. That's all they know. The Cheeto bag is missing. No evidence that would support any other circumstantial. It's just theories, hypotheses. And they want you to be emotionally charged and convict Jaylin on insufficient evidence that does not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he did what he's accused of. So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you must do your duty. Unlike others in this case, you must find Jaylin not guilty of all charges. Thank you.
Councilman, please approach.
Mr. Brown is right about one thing. I have a theory. I have a theory of the case, and I've been straightforward with you from the start on what that theory is. The fact that it's a theory doesn't make it any less compelling. Gravity is a theory. And it's a theory that's supported by evidence because we know every time you drop something, it falls to the ground. And this theory that the defendant killed Zion Foster is also supported by evidence. And I didn't hear a lot of discussion about that evidence in Mr. Brown's closing argument. I heard a lot of discussion pointing fingers at the investigation not being thorough enough, which is ironic in a case where we had dozens of people digging through a landfill, risking their health to find a body that he put there. Yet where's the criticism of him? He is the one who undermined this investigation from the start. And now what do we have? We've got this magical innocent explanation for everything. Innocent explanation for him exchanging these sexually explicit messages with his 16-year-old cousin who is a survivor of sexual assault. We have this magical, fantastical, innocent explanation for him putting her body in a dumpster. This innocent explanation for witness tampering, this innocent explanation for everything. Isn't that a bit of a coincidence? Mr. Brown raised several issues, and I'm going to go through them. Why were there no photos of the gash? Well, that's because you heard testimony that Katrina Smith's phone, which was the phone where these text messages about the gash came from, it wasn't seized until after that statement. So when he's sitting in there on January 19th, they don't know about those text messages. There was a question about why the jar wasn't collected. Again, the photo, the one photo that shows that jar, a little speck in the photo, if that's even the jar he was talking about, those photos were taken on January 17th, 2 days before he came forward with his statement. On January 17th, the defendant's claim was still, Zion Foster was never there. I was never with her. That was his claim as of that date. There was a question about, well, the
the scene was thoroughly analyzed, so why wasn't there any blood found? Well, if she choked her to death, you wouldn't expect to find blood, would you? There was a question about forensics on the car. Why wasn't everything submitted? Why didn't we submit every single item to the lab? Well, you heard testimony that defense attorneys can ask for things to be analyzed too. If that was something he really wanted analyzed, he could have done it himself instead of just complaining about it at trial here to make the investigation look like it lacked integrity. But that's all that is. It's a tactic. And what would that tell us? If anything was found in the car, what would that tell us other than what we already know, which is that her body was in there? There's not a lot more information that we're going to get. Same with the idea of JMO and questioning whether JMO really indicated in the car. Again, he acknowledged that he put human remains in the car. JMO indicated that he smelled human remains in the car. What else are we going to tell from analyzing anything from that trunk other than that? This claim that, well, there were all these threats. There were all these threats on these people, and that's why Katrina Smith didn't want to testify, and the police didn't do enough to look into those threats. Where is the evidence of those threats? There's nothing that's been presented that's specific as to who made the threats, when were they made, what was said. Nothing specific. The idea that someone can just say, I felt threatened, and there's supposed to be some massive investigation done at that point, it makes no sense. It's a complete sideshow. He claimed that he didn't want Katrina to come to court because of those threats, for her safety. It wasn't anything to do with the subpoena. Again, listen to those calls again. In one of the calls, there's specific reference. I don't think they're going to subpoena you again, but if they do subpoena you, just take the advice from the attorney and don't respond. Don't say anything. And then he makes it all the more clear in that next call, if I do take this all away, and I'm going to choose my words carefully because he's on a recorded line, as good as you can, don't be there. And that's innocent. And he provides a similar explanation for the call where he expressly asked her to research recanting a statement, claiming somehow that he's researching the implications of his original statement where he denied that he was with Zion and he recanted that. That's complete nonsense. He says expressly in the call that his statement is what's being used against him, and he wants her to look into the pros and cons of recanting a statement. And he says on those other calls, right after those statements in January of 2022, that they're complete nonsense, that he just said what his lawyer told him to say. He came up with this story, and that's what he came up with. There's a claim that he did all this. He did what he did because he was afraid of getting caught for marijuana, afraid of getting busted for pot. You can use your common sense. If you go to a marijuana dispensary, there's not going to be a team of ATF agents waiting to bust you and take you to federal prison for that. It's about the equivalent of a parking ticket. You ever heard of somebody getting rid of a body to avoid a parking ticket? He points to this one example where there's a mention of the possibility of calling 911. And yeah, there is. And that's in not the first statement that he made on January 19th. It's not in the second statement that he made on January 20th. It's in the third statement that he made on June 10th, 6 months after he killed Zion Foster. And it's buried on page 73 of that transcript, toward the midpoint of that statement, where he finally says, yeah, he could have called 911. That somehow exonerates him, when everything else he said is that what he was considering was, well, I could have put her in my basement, or I could have put her in a storage unit to cover up a death by seizure. this issue of the pornography, there's a reason that we don't play. We're not going to play those videos in court. It's not admissible to just sit here and show violent pornography to a jury. That's for his benefit. That is for his benefit. And now he's trying to turn that around and saying, we're trying to mislead you by not playing the video. But there's no evidence that Detective Gilliman's description is inaccurate. Those were videos depicting the brutal rape of young women. And they were on his phone. The same phone that had very specific.
I would object. There, one of the videos depicting a brutal rape. That's a mischaracterization.
And yeah, he's right about that. They're actors, but they're actors pretending to be brutally raped. Does that make it any better? On a phone where he has, sure, he's got this wide-ranging interest in porn. There's 1,152 different pornographic web pages visited. But what in the hell is he doing when he's just gotten out of prison for lying to the police, putting his...
Objection, Your Honor, to that last statement. If we can approach this briefly.
After he goes away after putting his cousin's body in a dumpster, he gets out of prison. He's got this phone. And he's got very specific search terms for cousin-themed pornography, step-cousin-themed pornography at that. And again, just an innocent explanation. It's no problem. It's just part of his normal porn activity. Now the defense has come around to this idea that, well, it's not a drug overdose. That was all nonsense. He lied about that, right? It's not a suicide. They were just, he openly acknowledges now that he was only bringing that issue up basically to malign the victim, to make her look bad. The fact that she was troubled. The fact that she was troubled does not mean that she deserved to be deprived of a proper burial and end up in a landfill. It's obnoxious to think that. And so now it's just a seizure. It's just a seizure. Again, all that stems from Cortez Gonzalez saying that one time he saw Zion close her eyes for a second or two. That's it. That's it. You know, during the jury selection process in this case, I asked about this concept of the burden of proof in this case, where we acquit people based on reasonable doubts as to their guilt or innocence. Reasonable doubts are common sense doubts, but we don't acquit people based on what? Based on mere possibilities of innocence. And I try to use this example of somebody with a lotto ticket, right? You got a lotto ticket before those numbers are called. You're not going to make a major life decision based on that lotto ticket. You're not going to quit your job based on the mere possibility that you're going to get rich when those numbers are called, because that's not a common sense thing to do. This idea of a seizure never came up in one of his statements, never shows up in any of the hundreds of pages of medical records. And he wants to insinuate that it's there. But don't you think if it was there, he would have pointed that out to you? He'd have pointed you to a specific page. This idea of a seizure, that is his lotto ticket. That is his lotto ticket, and he is asking you to cash it for him. Do not be fooled. Do not do it. You have seen nothing but lies. You've seen, in his own words, manipulation level 3. Throughout this case, throughout the entirety of the investigation, that's all you've seen from him. He is incapable of telling you what the truth is. And the person that he killed, Zion Foster, is incapable of telling you what happened because he made sure that she's gone. And he made sure that the best evidence of what he did to her is gone with her body. You're the only ones now left who can speak. And you are going to speak through the verdict that you give in this case. I'm asking you that you speak for Zion Foster and that you speak the truth. I'm asking you that you speak the word guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Elsey. We've been going in for a while. We're going to take a quick break, 5 or 10 minutes. Let you stretch your legs, use the facilities, and then I'll return final instructions. All right.
Recording stopped.
Okay, so we're not going to go through the jury instructions because that can get a little boring. But here's the deal. A verdict has been reached. Within 30 minutes of them going into the deliberation room, they reached a verdict. So let's get to it.
Recalling case number 23-3818-01-FC, People State of Michigan versus Jaylin Brazier. Appearances, please.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Ryan Elsey for the people.
Good afternoon, Mr. Brian Brown, on behalf of Mr. Jaylin Brazier.
Good afternoon, Mr. Jaylin Brazier. Thank you, Mr. Brazier, Mr. Brown, and Mr. Elsey. There were 2 notes. The first note asks for another copy of the verdict form, and then a short time later, a few minutes ago, I received a note that the jury's reached a verdict. As such, I'll call the jury and take the verdict. All rise for the jury.
When they usually say when the jury comes in so quickly that it's always a guilty verdict. I just can't believe that. I just felt like there was probable cause. But beyond a reasonable doubt, I don't know about that. As far as the murder goes.
Please be seated. Also, the jury is present. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I've received a note that you reached a verdict. If so, we have the corpus, and please stand and I'll take the verdict. You are juror number
11.
All right. As to count 1, how do you find?
Guilty.
As to count 2, how do you find?
Guilty.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, please raise your right hand. Do you listen to your verdict as recorded by the court? Do you say upon your oath that you find the defendant guilty as charged?
Yes.
Right. Please sit down. Juror number 2, was that and is that your verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 3, was that and is that your verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 4, was that and is that your verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 5, was that and is that your verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 7, was that and is that your verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 8, was that and is that your verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 9, was that and is that your verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 10, was that and is that your verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 11, was that and is that your verdict?
Yes. Sorry.
All right. Juror number 12, was that and is that your verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 13, was that and is that your verdict?
Yes.
And juror number 14, was that and is that your verdict?
Yes.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Your turn in the jury room. I'll be there to talk with you briefly, and then you'll be free to leave. All right. Please be seated. Remand continued. We'll set this out for sentencing. It's set it for June 3rd. Is everybody available June 3rd?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Anything else, Mr. Ellis or Mr. Brown?
Nothing further for the defense.
No, Your Honor, thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.
Oh, bless her heart.
Recording stopped.
That's her mother. She's gotten justice. Aw. Wow, it's a long hug. I think her mom's so pretty. She was beautiful. She was a beautiful girl. Oh, that was the officer in charge that's hugging her. I'm gonna mute it 'cause all you hear is the ruffling of them getting in and out of the jury box or whatever. I think that's her dad right there, Zion's biological father, because he was sitting separate from her, but he got really choked up. Okay, well, there you have it, guys. That concludes our coverage of this trial. Well, I would say until the sentencing does resume on June 3rd. So I will be going live for that since we do have a specific time and date. I want to thank you all for watching. Thank you for being here with me through this trial. And if you have any comments or would like to express any condolences to the family, please do so in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe. And until next time, be good. Stay blessed.